Hello, and welcome to Calv'S Tales of Fictitious Events. I'm Kaylie Morwenna. Let's get started, shall we? Calvin Langdon was sitting on a bench in a quaint little market town, eating a bag of Doritos. Not the usual kind, but the kind you may find in a blue packet. A rather odd gentleman sat down beside him and said, "Oi, you, give us a crisp." "No fucking way," Calvin replied, as he attempted to stuff the remaining triangular-shaped Doritos into his mouth. "These are my Doritos. You can get your own fucking crisps," he yelled. The gentleman was not pleased about this in the slightest. He climbed up on the wall beside them and performed a cannonball dive. He landed on the edge of the bench, throwing Calvin into the air. Passers-by were shocked. The absolute precision of this dive was perfect, as they held up white pieces of paper with the number 10 written in large font. Calvin, still in the air, was not at all pleased at the outcome of this event. With an angry tone, he spoke. "Who the fuck do you think you are, mate? Doing cannonballs and shit? Aha! Well, it is I, Brian Yellowboat." Calvin was surprised by this. "Brian Yellowboat?" he replied skeptically. All of a sudden, a loud crash of thunder occurred as two schooners fell from the clouds above, each with a distinct hue matching that of the petals of a springtime daffodil. "Jesus fucking Christ!" Calvin yelled. "Ah, yes, well," Brian Yellowboat continued. "My name happens to be a sacred summoning spell that can only be spoken by those with the ancient gene." Calvin, still in the air from the cannonball incident, was rather confused by this development. He slowly brought himself to a steady fall and landed comfortably upon his visage. "Fucking hell," Calvin remarked. "I could have broken my nose, and my fucking jeans are blue, thank you very much." However, his memory had failed him, for in fact, he was not wearing blue jeans at all. In a freak case of probability, Calvin had chosen to wear his black jeans on this day. This made his statement redundant, and because of this event, the two schooners suddenly vanished. "Ha! There you go, Brian Yellowboat. How'd you fucking like that, eh?" he yelled. "Oh dear," Brian Yellowboat said with pity. "It seems you have much to learn, Padawan," as a 1993 Fletcher Aerosport with a 75 horsepower two-stroke outboard motor appeared directly on the grass in front of them. "Fuck's sake," Calvin squealed in surprise. "I didn't even think they came in yellow." Brian Yellowboat was finding this entire situation rather amusing as he crackled manically. "It's a power that has been imbued upon you from birth, Mr. Langdon." Calvin looked up rather confused. "Fuck's sake," he said. "How do you know my fucking name, then?" Calvin inquired. This was a rather confusing situation indeed, as Calvin had never met this gentleman, nor ever seen him during his entire lifetime. Little did Calvin know the gentleman in question had been in the queue behind him at the local Tesco supermarket that very day. "Well, dear Calvin, I have my ways, and you, sir, are not going to believe what I say next." Brian Yellowboat paused and stared at Calvin. Calvin stared at Brian Yellowboat. "Well?" Calvin remarked. "Well indeed, Mr. Langdon," he replied, "for I, Brian Yellowboat—" Before he could finish, a 20-foot Hurley sailing yacht complete with a bilge pump and solar panels and a month's supply of tinned pork chops appeared out of thin air above the river that ran through the middle of the quaint market town. "I," Brian Yellowboat continued, as he performed an acrobatic flip towards the Hurley, which appeared to have all its sails rigged and ready to go. "I," he said once again. Calvin started to appear visibly browned off and had enough. "I fucking what, mate?" he implored. "Fucking hell! Clickbait gets my dander right up." He continued to yell, "And if you think you're going to get that boat under that fucking bridge, you've got another thing coming, mate." Brian Yellowboat, unfazed by Calvin's statement, continued. "I found something of value to you, Mr. Langdon. Yes, something of great value to you indeed." Calvin cut him off. "Jesus, Murphy, fucking titty shitting Christ," he wailed. "Get to the fucking point, mate." Brian Yellowboat looked at him with a smurf on his face and spoke softly with the following words. "I found your—" He paused once again until he let out one last word. "Wallet." He finished as he removed said wallet from his back pocket and threw it over to Calvin, who by now was sat on the floor in frustration. "Well," Calvin started, "it looks like I am the asshole in this situation then, doesn't it?" "Well, thank you very much, Brian Yellowboat." He thanked Brian with sincere gratefulness. With this, a small dinghy, yellow in tone, with black painted wooden oars, appeared to land in wooden children's playground that happened to be in the vicinity of the incident. Strange," Brian Yellowboat muttered under his voice. He turned to Calvin and spake, saying, "You summon a dinghy with oars, but no rowlocks. Would appear you need some practice, Baron von Calvin." "Fucking hell," Calvin replied, as Brian Yellowboat proceeded to depart. He pulled the jibs and sheets and sailed off towards an old bridge, supposedly crafted upon the wool of sheep. The yacht, unable to fit through such a bridge, had fallen into great peril. It was moving towards the stone bridge at quite a speed. Calvin, feeling bad for the way he treated Brian Yellowboat, ran faster than a Ford Mondeo with an aftermarket exhaust that had been doing what can only be described as twat laps around the local town. He ran towards the bridge, jumped and performed a cannonball dive that the world had never seen. As he hit the water behind Brian Yellowboat's boat, that was yellow, a huge tidal wave formed in his wake and lifted Brian Yellowboat's yellow boat into the air. "My God, he's got it," Brian Yellowboat remarked, as an old age pensioner named Dorothy dropped her Zimmer frame and held up a white piece of parchment. It had the numerals of 11 written on the surface in large text. "He went to 11. He truly is who the prophecy spoke of," Brian spake. "Fucking hell, I only bloody did it, didn't I?" Calvin cheered at himself. Brian Yellowboat, still airborne, sailed off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Calvin, on the other hand, his story had only just begun. And we'll pick that up next time on episode 369. Thank you for tuning in.